Thank you very much, and we continue with the press briefing. We want to start by informing the general public that the general security situation across all corners of the country is still peaceful, and we don't have any untoward incidents of security concern. You're aware that there are a number of reforms that are taking place at the judicial level following the address of His Excellency the President regarding tougher bail terms and conditions, especially on persons or accused persons linked to capital cases. Of course, these reforms are basically directed towards the cause for justice and equality to ensure that some of the dangerous suspects or accused persons who pose a danger to the public don't just find their way back into society. So, of course, the Uganda Police Force, of course, welcomes a number of reforms in the judicial sector, and we remain committed to working with the Office of the Attorney General where our input is required, because the safety of the public is basically most important, and we believe that the biggest goal is to help improve trust, transparency, and accountability, which is the backbone to safer communities. So the IGP has instructed our Director for Legal and Human Rights to work with the Office of the Attorney General where our input is required. He's able to provide that input. I'm not going to talk about the matter of the pastor who was arrested for aggravated human trafficking and sexual exploitation of children, because it has already been handled. But of course, we really need to give some bit of guidance to parents and guardians who hand over these children to some of these to ministries that tend to look after these children in terms of furthering their education and promoting their well-being. Because you find that what happened, because look at the 4 girls who were pregnanted, very young girls. You see? Now, they were pregnanted under the close stewardship of the pastor. Now, the parents who come from Tororo had spent all that period, like the girl who gave us the complaint, the 17-year-old victim, was 6 months pregnant. And you find that the parents, the guardians, don't even take time to make a follow-up to find out the kids whom we gave to an orphanage, to a ministry to take care of their education. How far have they gone with their education? What about their well-being and the other support that is being given to them? We tend not to follow up. And then you find these abuses coming up. 54 people who are vulnerable were being exploited sexually, or four girls were being exploited sexually, and then you find that the other vulnerable people are not even getting the right services, living under squalid conditions, and so on and so forth. So we urge members of the public to take keen interest in their neighborhood, especially where children and other vulnerable persons are gathered for further care and support. The file actually went to the resident senior state attorney, and we expect to charge the pastor anytime this week. Apparently, we have also come out to get to warn the public on the increase in cases arising out of conmen defrauding unsuspecting victims who are actually going to deposit money, like to the bank and coming from the bank, and even those whom they who tend to have cash on them. Now, we arrested one of the conmen, and we are pursuing 2 others for defrauding a business manager in Mbale. The one who is in custody, he's a driver who forms part of a gang, sort of an organized crime syndicate that deals in fake US dollar currency and targets unsuspecting clients taking cash deposits, or those who are from making cash withdrawals from the bank. Now, the driver whom we arrested is called Buloni James. We intercepted him along our checkpoint, which is located 3 miles on Mbale Kampala Highway. He was driving a Toyota white car registration number UBF2872. So we managed to impound the vehicle and also arrested this driver. Now, the whole thing started where this driver and 2 of his accomplices who were on the run approached the manager of Starbucks petrol station on the 30th, towards the end of last month. And they got information that the manager was going to deposit 15 million shillings at the bank, that is Equity Bank. So they enticed him with a fake note of US dollars and told him it was worth an equivalent of 35 million. This man was convinced and diverted from going to the bank to make the deposit, and went to Bazaar Street in one of the restaurants where they exchanged the $50 note, which is fake, for 15 million shillings that was going to deposit. That is company money. Now, what really pains us is that we have again and again repeatedly informed the public, sensitized them, that these transactions regarding foreign currency, dollars, pounds on the streets is mostly by conmen and fraudsters and should be avoided. But you find that there are still people who have this get-rich-quick mentality, and they rush to want to get rich quick, and you find them being lured into these transactions. So, luckily enough, as the 3 occupants were driving off with the 15 million, this victim, Okello, suspected foul play, and he dashed and jumped on the bonnet of the vehicle while yelling for help. So several responders tried to intervene. What the suspects did, they picked part of the 15 million and threw the cash in the streets, so the people were diverted onto the money that was being thrown. But this victim, Okello, clung onto the bonnet up to 3 miles. They tried to shave him off the vehicle, the bonnet, but he clung on until the vehicle was intercepted by our police officers. We managed to arrest him, and we recovered above something to a tune of 7.5 million, which was still with the driver, and we rushed Okello to the nearest clinic for medical attention. So these kinds of conmen have tricked so many people in Bugembe. Here in Jinja, I remember we carried out an operation and arrested 21 people. So what they are doing, they are moving very far away into these upcoming cities and major towns. But these are tricks which are well known here in Kampala. And for them, they tend to target elderly persons, new managers, local villagers, and clients who are to and from the bank. So we urge all citizens and visitors to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity or fraudulent transactions. Then we also have two security personnel who were actually arrested in Chikagati. This was after we got a complaint from our counterparts on the Tanzanian side, who were businessmen lured to come and buy tin which is a mineral on the Ugandan side. So the complainants who are Tanzanians, that is one called Jackson Lugaramba James, who comes from Chigarama village in Nyarutumbura sub-county, Kwera district in Tanzania, were lured by businessmen on the Ugandan side of tin that was being sold. And they being traders, of course, they welcomed the idea and they gathered money amounting to 25 million shillings Tanzanian currency. They took time to cross River Kagera up to Chikagati, and they joined their counterparts here in Uganda. So, as they were waiting for the other parties on the Ugandan side, the OC station Chikagati, ASP Nechirira Collins, joined them together with the Lieutenant Rogers Makoba, who is attached to our detach in Chikagati, that is at Casket Detach. So in that process of waiting for their counterparts with the money on them, these two security personnel turned against them, and of course they grabbed the money and chased them back to Tanzania, which is very, very unprofessional. Of course, these are activities of gross acts of misconduct, which we have to come out strongly to condemn. The moment this information reached headquarters, a directive was given by the Inspector General of Police to ensure that these two are arrested for aggravated robbery. So we are processing them so that a lesson is sent out to all security personnel. So these two are being detained and are being processed on charges of aggravated robbery. Again, we have our police officers in Maracha who managed to recover a gun from one of the robbers who was terrorizing that region. This suspect was basically identified the suspect. I need to get the true particulars of the suspect. No, it is not indicated here, so I'll have to leave that story. Let's proceed. We want to give a summary of the incidents that happened during the week of 27th to 2nd October. We had 71 major incidents which were reported to police throughout the country, leading to 55 deaths and 27 suspects. Of course, murder had the highest number of incidents with 15 cases, which were very serious, followed by murder by mob with 10 cases, and suspected murder 6 cases, then aggravated robbery and the likes. But again, we want to caution the public on incidents of fire outbreak, because we noticed that there has been an increase. And for the week under review, we had several incidents of fire outbreaks that led to 4 deaths. And the major causes were basically due to electronic circuits, that is arising out of substandard wiring materials, the use of unqualified technicians, CAMUF, which is very common. You find this in ghettos and in places where constructions are not supervised. Then we have electricity theft, where small wires are concealed in gardens and plantations and electricity stolen. Then negligence on use of electric appliances such as water heaters and among others. Storage of petrol in dwelling houses has been a cause of incidents of fire. Then abandoned candles and charcoal stoves have also been another cause. For instance, in Koboko, we had a male juvenile who died in an inferno. This was at Triangle Cell in Koboko municipality, where Ajo Kasim, alias Wenga, 13 years, a Dinka by tribe, was burnt to death in a grass-thatched house. The grass-thatched house was being used for storing fuel that was basically smuggled from the DRC. So when the house caught fire, the juvenile had gone back to refill his bottle with fuel for sale. So that is how the fire spread in that process, and he got burnt inside the vehicle, inside the house. Then we had incidents of two females who were electrocuted in Vutetea parish, that is Namisindwa. One of the victims was identified as Monica Catherine, 37 years, and her niece called Lukendo Naume. They were electrocuted from their house. And when we visited the scene, we found that there was illegal connection of electricity, which is something very common. They had concealed the wires through a banana plantation. These very small wires, which can easily get damaged. And that is how they got electrocuted, because of the open wires. Another incident of fire outbreak was in, this was at Chikada village in Chibale district, where one Babazi Agnes also got burnt when an electric short circuit burnt her household properties. The matter was reported, but she was saved and rushed to the hospital. We had another incident where 8 housing units occupied by families in Natete also got burnt, but our fire and rescue services was able to rush and have the fire put out. Basically, that was that on incidents of fire. Then in our briefs, we also need to talk about incidents of child torture, which still continue. We had a murder of a female juvenile resulting from torture here in Nabweru at Chirinyabigo zone in Kawanda ward, where one Nachid Sachizivu Josephine, 4 years, was living with her stepmother called Nabukenya Sarah, who continued to torture this 4-year-old female juvenile to the extent that she died. When we carried out post-mortem, it indicated that she died from torture. So we've arrested Nachid, we've arrested the stepmother, one Nabukenya Sarah, and are charging her with child torture and murder. Then another area that is a bit neglected is on the increase in the cases of suicide in the country. Cases of suicide are on the rise in various parts of the country, and in the week under review, 4 lives were lost arising out of suicide, and this is basically resulting out of cases of divorce, separation between lovers, and lack of belonging, especially after release from prison. We have a former convict who, in the incidents that we registered, who decided to take his life when he was still being stigmatized and in the community where he thought he had returned after going through rehabilitation. Amongst the cases, we had suicide by poisoning of a university student. This happened at Maguju cell, where one Muhindo Innocent, 23 years and a third law university student at Uganda Pentecostal University, that is Fort Portal campus, committed suicide by taking poison. So we got suicide notes that were actually left behind by him, and samples of organophosphate tablets which we got, and gray crystals. It is unfortunate. This is a dear student, and you just decide to take your life like that when your parents have actually invested a lot in your upbringing and education. Then there was also another case of suicide by hanging of one called Biarogaba Dennis. This was at Keitamba village in Kabarole. This is the former convict who had just returned from Katojo prison in Fort Portal City, where he had been sentenced for theft of a TV screen. So he was not welcomed back into the area and had accumulated debts within that short period. So due to frustration, he decided to actually hang himself. Then again, in Namaingo district, we had another case of attempted murder and suicide, where a young couple of one called Mukisa Stephen alias Ogara, who had newly separated with his wife of 20 years, of aged 20, that is Abarasa Christine, with whom they had a child of 1.5 years old. So because of the conflict in their home, his wife, Barasa Christine, decided to leave their home, that is at Buhemba village, and returned to her parents. Now, what Mukisa Stephen did, he got a knife with him and went under the guise of visiting his wife in Buhemba village. And while at the brother's place, he drew the knife and stabbed his wife to the neck twice, and he ran away. So on reaching his home village, he thought he had killed his wife, and what he did was he also got a rope and committed suicide. For him, he died, but the wife is still nursing the other wounds arising out of the attempt to murder her. So you can see these are incidents that can be handled, but why people decide to take their lives in such a manner is painful, and that's why we've decided to basically come out and see how to bring out this problem so that we can help intending victims. Another case of suicide was reported in Rukonjiri, that is Furuma village, Karangaro ward, where one Louis Inomugisha was found hanging on a piece of mosquito net tied on the roof of his sitting room. He also became frustrated after his wife Katushave Penelope, together with their 3 children, abandoned him on the 11th of September due to failure to provide for them. Basically, these cases of suicide are many, 5 in total. We also want to continue cautioning families because we still continue to register cases of murder arising out of domestic violence. We had about 4 cases arising out of murders out of domestic violence. For instance, in Rutete sub-county, that is Kabarole district, one Charikunda Vastin, aged 20 years, was murdered and buried in a banana plantation by her husband, one called Asaba Josephat. Asaba Josephat has been a drunkard, a serious drunkard in the village, and wherever he would come back home, they would always fight with the wife Charikunda Vastin, with whom they have been staying together for 8 years and have 3 children. So this time when he got drunk, he had that serious misunderstanding with the wife, cut her into, hacked her severally, and then dragged the body into the banana plantation. You can see really how horrific some of these incidents. You've stayed with a companion for this period, and then you turn against them in such a way. So we managed to get this information. We arrested the suspect. Asaba is in our custody, and we went ahead to transfer the body for further post-mortem. Another incident of murder on a spouse was in Chisoro district, where one Chimpaye Agnes, aged 30, was beaten to death by the husband, Turiachira Lauben, during a domestic brawl. Here the suspect, identified as Turiachira Lauben, reported himself to the police at Buchimbiri, indicating how he had murdered the wife. We are also processing him for that murder. Our operations on curfew and the partial lockdown still continue. During the period under review, we managed to arrest 1,365 people for flouting the provisions of curfew. 741 were cautioned, 58 were released on police bond, 168 are pending court, 398 were charged to court. Then motorcycles, 1,362 were impounded, 1,063 were given EPS tickets, 221 riders, including border borders, were cautioned, and 41 motorcycles are still unclaimed. Motor vehicles. I need to repeat, disregard that. It is 1,362 motor vehicles that were impounded for flouting the provisions of curfew. 1,063 motorists were issued with EPS tickets. 221 drivers were cautioned. 41 motor vehicles are still unclaimed at our police stations. Motorcycles, including border borders, 2,848 were impounded. We issued EPS tickets to 2,187, cautioned 452 riders, and 510 are still parked at our major stations, pending. So those are the areas where it is. They are still evaluating and coming up with a number of reviews on court bail and why it should not be, bail should not be offered to suspects or accused persons on capital cases. So it is still work in progress. But like I indicated to you, of course, as police, we also have an input to make. The Director of Human Rights and Legal Services is supposed to come up with an evaluation from the police component And this police component is important, is that when these people are released, like on a case of murder, of aggravated robbery, and they go back to the community, what is the reaction? What is the response from the community? In these cases of mob justice, mob violence, the many cases of threatening, the conduct of these other suspects and accused persons, when they go back to the community, what reaction is there? You get it. Do they still pose a danger to the community when they go back, when they are released on police bond, on court bail? So that is the evaluation, that is the analysis that is being done to be shared with the Office of the Attorney General. So as simple as that. Talking about the capacity to accommodate suspects on capital cases at our police stations. Let me tell you that the police bond, each and every suspect has a right to benefit from a police bond. I want to tell you that there is nothing to worry about, because 95% of the police bonds that are issued at the police stations are on minor and serious cases. The police bonds that are issued on capital cases are just 5%, which is minimum, okay? Because in many cases, like in some of these murder cases, there is evidence which is direct. There is evidence which avails itself in due course. So we are always guided by the Office of the DPP in doing this work. So if at all there is any legal reform that comes up with a tougher bond condition for suspects while still at police, when we reach that stage, we shall be able to see what comes up.